Hey guys, welcome to another video here at TriniFX. My name is Josh, uh, founder of this lovely community here that we do have. And today, what we're gonna do, just gonna dive right into it. We're gonna discuss the charts, last week trades, right? The trades of last week. So we did have sort of a very confusing week in terms of the US dollar, right? If we look here, I'm just diving real quick into it. If we look here, let me just put it up from the 10th to the 14th, right? Okay, so yeah, looking at USD news, right? So we did have some stuff on Wednesday and Tuesday, right? These were the two things that we did have firstly on the US dollar, right? And then on the 13th, we did have initial jobless claims, right? And if we just look here, we can see a definition of that. Is the number of people who are currently unemployed and receiving unemployment benefits who filed for unemployment benefits at least 2 weeks ago and have not been hired or fired since that time is referred to as the United States as the continuing jobless claims, right? And why this news is important or why it holds any relevance is because usually what we could get from these jobless claims numbers is a sense of the labor market, where it's at currently compared to last month and previous months, and we can see whether it's actually being stimulated, if the labor market is growing, how much people are employed and how much people are actually unemployed. And then on Friday we did have some retail sale news, right? So I'm gonna dive into why was this important, why is this important, right? Starting from the Fed Chair Powell's speech, right? So if you don't know who Fed Powell is, Jerome Powell, right? He's the head of the Federal Reserve, and I actually have it here. Well, he's the head of the Federal Reserve, right? And basically what he does every now and then, he comes to testify and answer questions from Congress and other entities about the current state of the US economy, right? And depending on what he says, his words lay very heavily. It has a very high impact on US sentiment. All right. So what he says is watched very closely and scrutinized. Okay. So let's just dive into some of these pairs, right? Let's look at USD CAD first, actually. Right? Let's take a look at USD CAD first. USD CAD. Right? So we could see that around here, right, we did have this coming out on the 11th of Jan, which would be somewhere around here, right? So around here, that is when we had Fed Chair Powell speak. Okay, so you can see around this time we did have a bearish move, right? Price did start moving downwards in favor of the CAD over the USD, and we can see across multiple US pairs, US cross pairs, right? We can see across multiple US cross pairs that is the case, right? So we did see some weakness from the USD, and price overall started pushing higher against the USD in these cases, such as NZD USD, 80 USD, Euro USD as well. You can see that they do share similarities in terms of the movements created, right? Same thing for GBP USD and AD USD here, right? You can see the similarities in their movement. They're very close, they're very aligned together, right? So the movements overall were the same across all the pairs, the cross USD pairs, right? So what happened? What caused this movement? What caused this bearishness, right? So overall long term, we do know that we are bullish on the US dollar, right? Inflation is high, therefore the Fed has to use their tools and other necessary assets that they do have in place, their policies, in order to combat the inflation level, because inflation is at an alarming level right now at 7%. which is what we'll see right here, right? Inflation 7%, right? And core inflation 5.5%, right? These are good numbers right here, right? The 7% number here, right? Because as you know, as inflation gets higher, it is worse for the economy, right? So as inflation goes up, it means that the value of the US dollar, this reserve currency, is now becoming devalued, right? The Fed is printing more money. The central banks are printing more money, right? And that more money is actually there to help stimulate the economy. However, there's a side effect of that, right? The more money that you do have circulating within the economy, the less valued that currency becomes. All right. So inflation is at its highest level it has ever been, which is at that 7% that we did see there. So when Jerome Powell spoke on inflation, he was being badgered with questions on inflation and the current inflation level. US sentiment actually shrunk because of this new stance that we saw Jerome Powell taking at the point of his testimony, right? So as he was being badgered with questions on inflation, because investors, hedge fund owners, other big companies, they are concerned about the current inflation level, because again, it is at an alarming height, being at 7%. Okay, and from the stance that he took while he was being questioned, he was dodging the question, being a little dodgy with it, and he didn't directly answer the question, but tried to reassure that they are going to actually look to combating the inflation, but however at a more steady pace compared to what we did have previously about the aggressiveness that we should have seen or would see in the coming months, right? So at that point, we saw the US dollar take a nosedive, right? So that is why overall all these pairs, we saw that weakness kicking in here on USD CAD, right? If we look at the 4-hour, we can see right here on that day, we got a strong 4-hour bearish push lower past this support level right here, right? And in hindsight, I did not look at the US card specifically, but as you can see, since we did get this bearish push, right, this strong bearish push, we can now say with some certainty that okay, the US dollar is now currently in a weakened state, so we could look for potential sells. One, if we could get a retracement right back into that level. However, that would have been very unlikely given the volatility that we did come to experience given that news, right? So price continued pushing lower from then. Okay, but once we did have that clean break, or we saw that price was breaking out, we could have entered a possible trade to the downside. Same thing vice versa for all these other currency pairs here, right, such as GBP USD. We can see right here we did have a move higher, right? So we can mark this here as a area of resistance, right? We had multiple retests here, one here, then we had multiple retests here on the 10th, the 9th, on the 10th, right? Price came into this level, rejected, and right around here on the 10th, we rejected. We actually pushed past that level, came back here on the 11th, and price started push up, right? We did get a bullish candle close on this last bearish push down, right? And at that point, we could have had a continuation to the upside right here, right? If we look to the 1 hour, we can see this more clearly, right? So we can see those multiple retests on that level. We already had a bullish movement on the GBP USD. As you know, on the GBP, right, on the British pound, we are more heavily invested to the upside. We do have a lot more GBP strength overall since that last rate hike that we saw in December, if I'm not mistaken, right? We did have a lot more GBP strength continuing on into this year, right? So at this point, when we got that push above right here, we also had this bullish push, right, pushing past this area of resistance, closing above. That is where we could have looked to get into a continuation to the upside move, right? and so forth for the rest of these USD cross pairs, right? Your USD as well. Kind of an interesting level right here, right? Price is coming back into this zone. Maybe we could get a continuation. Who knows, right? And maybe we could get a continuation. We do have that higher pushing up, and price is coming back into this level. If we could get a retest to continue on, right? So again, just going back onto topic, right? So we had Fed Chair Powell being a little bit more dodgy with the question on inflation, hence inflation fears kind of rise, and we saw that selling off on the US dollar, right? On Wednesday as well, we had where core inflation was at 7%, which was expected. We expected inflation to be high because all we have now is promises of combating inflation, but no action has been taken to do so as yet, right? We did actually was able to benefit on that move to the downside on the inflation numbers being released right around here. We got into a move to the downside, reaching about 5%, and price continued down all the way to 17% if we held the move to down here, right? This would have been 70% if we held that move down. But we got out somewhere around right here on that move, right? So with the USD inflation level being at 7%, we saw that move to the downside, right? Overall, on all of these pairs, you could see those large wicks that we are seeing, those large bullish wicks, all of those happened on the 12th around the same time of that US news being released. Okay, so overall at this point of time we were more bearish on the US dollar, because now what we do have is expectancy versus our reality, right? Our reality right now that we do face is that, okay, the Fed is now taking a more slower approach on combating inflation at this point of time from what we got from Jerome Powell, and inflation level is at 7%, right? The consensus was 7% here, and the previous was 6.8 and we came out at that 7% number, right? So this is our reality. Our reality is that inflation is at an all-time high, right? And the Fed has now kind of backdraft on what they said previously in the FOMC minutes, right? From what Fed Chair Powell was saying at his speech, right? So those are our realities that we do face. The expectancy, what we expect is that combating of inflation, right? Once we do come up to Fed interest rate hikes, whenever that news is to come out, I don't know the date at this moment, but we do expect to see the Fed actually take a stance on combating inflation. At this point, they don't really have a choice, right? So that is the reality that we do face, right? Overall, right now we are bearish. However, in the long run, we do have those bullish factors also in play. So it's a sort of balancing act concerning the US dollar right now, right? So what it is, how does this translate into the market, right? How does this translate into trade setups that you could possibly see with the US dollar? Overall, I am still very bullish on the US dollar, right? Even though we do face all these bearish fundamentals, market expectancy shows us that the Fed is likely, highly likely, and probable to increase interest rates because inflation needs to be combated, right? So, and this brings me to the point where I'm trying to make here on this move, the move that we took on NZD USD here. You can see this, took it somewhere around here, right? This was one move that we did have, right? And another move to the upside, which was the last position we took, which was right here, an uptrend for a possible push up on price, and stop loss somewhere around this area right here, right? So we were looking for price to actually push from this level and continue moving upwards based on that US dollar weakness, right? So continuation to the long side is what I was looking to see at that point of time, because as you saw, after all those bearish news events, right, we did see price push upwards. And again, if we look on the 4-hour here, we can see that price did break an area of resistance to the upside, right? So maybe you might want to call this a large range of sorts, right? And price broke to the upside here strongly on this 4-hour candle. Now we're looking for a retest back into that area for a continuation move up, again with the overall US dollar weakness that we were seeing for the past week, right? However, coming back to the last set of details that we did get released, which is retail sales. Again, retail sales is something that's not overly important. However, it does give a sort of look on the economy where it stands in terms of consumer spending, right, and overall consumer growth, right, in the sense of that consumer spending, right? So as you can see, we did have bad numbers here compared to what the expectancy was. Ideally, looking at it, not that far off if you're looking at retail sales, for example, right? But consumer spending overall was a little bit bad with the retail sales news that we did get, right? So again, with that bearishness, we're looking for that continuation in movement on these pairs, NZD, USD, and also AD, USD. We had a trade here as well, somewhere right around this area right here, right? So was looking for continuation to the upside based off that USD weakness. And again, looking at the technicals, we did have price breaking all these multiple levels of resistance, right, strongly. One, a push above this area right here, followed by another push. So we're looking for a retest of that area for that continuation moving upwards. However, we did not get that, right? So we can see that price started to push bearish on the day Friday, right, to the downside for whatever reason. Still unclear, because again, the fundamentals align and also the technicals align. This is just something that you see happen sometimes, right? Sometimes there are things that you can't account for, right? So we did get that push above, but price then closed the move upwards by pushing back down in favor of the US dollar, right? We did have an initial USD, NZD, USD sell here, right? Was looking at the close to the downside here, was looking for a possible break of this area, right, to continue to the downside. But then we got those multiple retests of support looking like it was going to hold, and then we did get a push away from that support level. So at that point, it was a little bit more biased to the buy side, right? Because we did get that push away from the level and price looked like it was going to continue, right? But at that point, however, I wasn't up for this when I saw these quick rejections, these candles pushing back, right? This was like 4 o'clock in the morning. Apparently price decided it didn't have enough momentum, enough buyers to continue the movement upwards after the break, and price started close down, right? So at this point, ideally, if we lived in an ideal world and I was up at this point of time, right, would have closed price somewhere right here, because this right here is an indication that okay, maybe the buyers aren't really that strong enough to continue pushing price higher at this point of time, right? So that is what happened on the trades, last set of trades that we did take, right? We did have some other trades here on CAD JPY too as well, right? Took the sell somewhere right here and price continued downwards, right, for a little bit, then retested this area and then started moving down a little bit more, right? If we looked here, we could see overall we do have some bullishness, right? If you just look to the side here, we do have some bullishness, right? Price is continuing to move a little bit higher. If we look right here, we can see that movement going up, right? We do have this sort of a range right here, a little bit, right? A little bit of indecisiveness from price, but still overall in an upward kind of momentum, right? So if we're looking at this here, right? If we're looking at this here, a break above this level would be nice to see for a continuation, right? Maybe a retest right here, and then a continuation move upwards, right? Retesting all these previous support levels, resistance levels, sorry. So something like this would be ideal to see for a continuation to the upside on CAD JPY. Overall, we are bullish on the CAD. The CAD has been bullish for quite some time as well, being one of the more better performing currencies, as well as the GBP, right? These are the two most performing currencies right now, right? In overall market direction, clear market direction and sentiment, we do have a bullish CAD and a bullish GBP. The euro is lagging in some ways, so it's a bit dicey to say whether or not we should have a bullish or bearish stance on the euro. Looking at euro GBP, we can see that we are trading in a range, right? Maybe it's choppy, but if we look at the 4-hour here, we can see multiple times since the beginning of January, right around the 4th, price has just been bouncing up and down between these levels right here, right? So this is price just moving up and down. Maybe we could get a retest of the low right here, right? And a possible pull back to the upside, but since we are overall bullish on the GBP, we could see price break lower, right? And as you can see here on Friday close, we did have this strong bearish candle close. So we'll be waiting to see how price reacts with this area right here, and maybe we could get a continuation move back to the upside, or we could see a break lower to the downside, and then a possible a clear continuation of the market, right? But overall, this is a bearish market as well. You can see that clearly here. We do have more clear bearish candle formations, rejections from this high as well. So a possible continuation is something that we could probably see in the upcoming months, if not next week, February month as well. Euro is still lagging behind in terms of any new policy statements, anything like that. We don't necessarily know where the European Union stands at this point of time in terms of their monetary policy statements, right? Looking into next week, we could see we do have some news events, maybe not that interesting. We have unemployment rate for GBP, unemployment change, looks like October-November comparison. Inflation for the CAD is something that we'll be looking for as well, right? This would be an interesting thing to see for the CAD. We have jobless claims again for the U.S. dollar, right? Which would basically, again, to just reiterate, jobless claims gives us a narrative for how labor markets are performing for the U.S. economy, right? So it's an indication towards the bigger news events that would be happening, such as unemployment and employment, right? Those numbers that do really affect market movement, right? So this, we could call it a sort of a precursor towards that event, right? So we could take all the information that we do get here, if we do get better numbers, and we could summarize that our overall expectancy for unemployment and employment, right? Whether it will be bearish or bullish, and we'll be able to take up buyers leading up to that actual news event. This is something that analysts do as well as the central banks, in terms of being able to come up with a consensus for their biases, right? So that is just something to note as well. And for Friday, we do have ADP employment change, and that looks like it for the interesting things. If you don't know what ADP employment change is, let's just look here right now. In Canada, the change is the total non-farm payroll employment is tracked by the ADP Canada National Employment Report over a 12-month period, right? And it is based on transactional payroll data from organizations that use ADP Canada. there are more than 2 million employees working in the following industries, which are represented by the data, right? So you can see that it accounts for quite a large sum of employees employed people in the labor market, right? So this is why this number actually matters to us. And if we just go down here, we can see a higher than expected figure should be seen as positive, which is bullish for the Canadian dollar, while a lower than expected figure should be seen as bearish for the CAD. We can see that the latest release that we did have, the actual was 231 compared to the 46.2k, right? Which was very bullish for the CAD. I remember when this came out, it was very bullish for the Canadian dollar. As you can see, the drastic change from the consensus that we did have, right, where the actual number was very positive, right, affecting the CAD in a big way. And for the next release, what we do have as a consensus is 140k, right? So a little less than the last set of numbers that we did receive, but we should see some bullishness, right? We should see some bullish flows for the Canadian dollar by then, right? The CAD has been pretty bullish overall, so if we do get some nice pullbacks, right, something like this, if we're looking at the CAD CHF, right, we could get some nice pullbacks maybe into this level right here, where we did have this bullish pushing right around this area. If we do get a pullback here, we could get a discounted price where we could possibly enter for a long trade setup, right? We are still overall bullish on the Canadian dollar. There's no reason to short it as yet, right? No real reason to look for sells on the Canadian dollar fundamentally or technically, right? So maybe you could get a short-term sell here or something like that, but overall on the 4 hour, if we're just looking and leading up to that news event, right here is a good level. We could possibly look for rejections for a move continuing upwards, right? And this is something to note as well. Uptrends, downtrends, it don't matter. Trending market, any trending market that we are in, we can see pullbacks, may be large or small pullbacks, right? It's part of market movement. The market doesn't move in one straight direction forever. Price does make pullbacks within trends, right? So seeing a large pullback, right, doesn't necessarily means okay, now we have to start shorting the Canadian dollar because now price is actually, pulling lower than what we're normally used to seeing. But if we do look at the bigger picture right here, or like on the 4 hour right here, we can see that price would probably pull back into this area of support, right, where it previously broke out of bullish, right? And at that point, we could have a lot of buyers right at this level waiting for price to come right here to start continuing the move upwards, right? So that is something to note as well, something that we could possibly see, right? Same thing goes for any other Canadian pair as well. Here, if we're looking at CAD JPY, right, a retest of this level, as you can see, price kind of ranging, right? It kind of in a range. If we're looking, we do have that bullish movement upwards. However, we have this sort of a bearishness right now, right? Price has been pulling back a little bit here, right? We tested the support right here, multiple rejections from that level. A push lower would be nice to get in for a discounted price again as well for CAD continuations, right? The thing with Canadian any JPY pairs really, right, they're very correlated with USD strength, right? So sometimes we might have large movements on the Japanese yen, not be it because of anything particularly with the yen itself, but overall fears of the market sentiment and stuff like that. When we do have fears of risk of sentiment, stuff like that, we see a rise in the JPY. It gains strength as it is considered a safe haven, as well as the CHF, right? Both of these currencies gain strength in terms of economic distress or uncertainty. That being currently sort of like what we see happening with the US dollar. with inflation being high, we could possibly see some strengthening of the Japanese yen, right? Because this is where investors, hedge fund owners, big capitalists, this is where they pool their money into in times of uncertainty, right? As well as the gold market as well, right? So gold is something as well that we see price rising as the US dollar becomes more and more uncertain, right? Interestingly enough, when we did have that US dollar weakness from Jerome Powell, we did see a rise in the Canadian dollar. We did see a rise in gold, right? Gold did rise above this level. And again, when we did have the inflation rate numbers, which would be on the 12th, right? You can see gold stayed around that level still, right? So ideally, what we'll have, most likely seen or expect to see was price actually push higher and continue to move upwards on gold, because again, as you can see in the forex market, on a lot of these currency pairs, that is what happened. That was the case. However, not so on gold. So we could say with a high probability that we have investors, we have big banks, hedge fund owners right at this area right here, right? For some reason, there's somebody pushing price downwards. This level holds high significance, right? But if we do get a break above this level, then gold could probably continue soaring higher. You don't have to take my word for it. I could be wrong about this, but it's interesting to see that on gold, which is an asset a lot of investors, right, push their money into when there's US weakness or US uncertainty. It's interesting to see gold not being able to pass this level, right? Especially when in the forex market on a lot of these currency pairs, take for example Euro USD, right? On that same day, we did have that bullish push, just pretty much just rocketing from that US dollar weakness, right? Vice versa on gold, we just sort of stayed in this area right here, barely moved an inch, right? And couldn't even push higher. We got rejections from here, then a strong rejection again from here. You can see multiple rejections from this area, right? So for some reason, gold is just unable to push past this area. But if we do see that push, right, once we do get that push to close above, then it's just probably likely to continue to soar, right? So that is something to look on gold as well. Pretty interesting stuff, right? Because it isn't what you expect from normal market movement, normal market dynamics, right? And that's it. I don't want to do too much right now. Again, this has been pretty long by itself. I just wanted to dive into some of the things that we saw, so you understand what we're seeing right now with the USD expectancy versus the reality we currently face, and why price moved that it did, right? A lot of these things has to do with asset classes as well. Who's benefiting from the current USD weaknesses and all of that, right? We saw that gold was unable to push past this level despite that weakness, right? And also, if we took a look at US oil as well, you can see US oil is rising too as well, right? Which should not be the case. However, we do see that rise in US oil as well. Price continue to move in a pretty bullishly, right? So if you did find some information, got something new out of this video, please leave a like on it, subscribe for future updates, and I'll be trying to do videos like this more regularly, going over on past trades, explaining the things that we are now seeing compared to things that we didn't see before necessarily, and the stance that we take moving forward on a lot of these currency pairs, right? As you know, the forex market is unsure, right? We work with probabilities and not certainties, right? And this is something you should take into account in your trading. A bias we may make today may not be the bias that we stay with tomorrow, right? It is a constant exchange of information, new data coming into the forex market, and therefore our bias or opinions, we cannot be too engrossed in them, right? We have to be able to be flexible, take new information, and make new assumptions, basically, right? And take new stances, right? And that is not to say that, okay, you're quick to change your opinion about something, but it is how this particular niche operates, right? We have to take new information, new data, put it in, use it to our advantage, and come up with biases that are highly probable, right? So that is just something to note as well, right? What we say today might not matter tomorrow, right? We may have to come up with new biases for the week after, and the week after that, and the month after that, and whatnot, right? This is just something that happens. The only thing that we do have control of in the forex market is our own emotions and the amount that we're willing to risk and take on each or any particular given trade, right? And yeah, that's it for this one, guys. Leave a like, subscribe, and if you found any new information, any knowledge from this video, maybe you gain insight on something that you didn't previously had insight on before, yeah, just make sure to share the video. Let's get this channel a little bit more traction, help those that are new to forex and those that are coming back, after having a little hiatus, right? So thank you for viewing, and I'll see you guys in the next one.